Well, on margins, so we talked about net profit margin, meaning the bottom line as a percentage of sales, but there's also gross profit, which is the margin that people use in bidding, right?
Hmm.
That's your share of the sales dollar. So you sell a dollar, but it costs you 60 cents worth of material and labor. What you have left really is 40 cents, which you
Hmm.
have to use first to pay your overhead. And once that's
Yep.
paid, it begins to accumulate as profit.
Yeah.
So how do you see people, what attention, how do people bid? That's my question. So how do they estimate a job and put this bid in and say, yeah, that's a good bid? What do you see as a methodology for that?
Some people do just what you just said. Yeah, that's a good bid.
Wow, that would be the biggest sale we've ever made, biggest project we ever made.
Yep, that was it.
Yeah.
That was a good bid. Some guys have these Excel spreadsheets that they come up with, and but very few are really doing like a true takeoff where they're counting up like every cent of like how does what does this nail cost? What does this screw cost? That type of thing, and really putting that into the equation and then marking that up. And some people don't understand that, the markups, they're not the same with the project margin that you're gonna yield. Uh, so I may mark up material 30%, but I may yield a margin of 15%. Uh, so you have to understand where I need to mark up different things, whether it's labor, equipment, subs, uh, and material. And those markups can be all different types of markups. I can have a 5% markup on labor. I can have a 20% markup on material. Those type of things. You can play around with those markups, and then with playing around with those markups, then you can see, okay, what did that yield me for a job profit margin, and is that acceptable? Well, that just all depends on, again, going back to your net profit operating margin, because now you have to determine how many jobs do I need just like this, and that's going to run perfectly, because that's the only way that I'm going to yield this margin, because the job has run perfect. And then factor that in into, okay, I need 10 of these jobs for this month to cover, you know, um, my operating costs. So I need, you know, 50 of these jobs to take care of myself for the year. So then that goes down to estimating, like how much in revenue do I need to be estimating, to make sure that I have landed enough of those jobs for the year to cover my operating margin. So you need to come up with a closing rate, like how good are you at closing, and really winning those bids, those type of things. So all that kind of data needs to be tracked and checked. And you can very easily see, if I don't have a project management system, it's just very hard to track all this stuff.
Wow, you are so perfectly on point. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate hearing this. I call it intentional bidding, and what you just said, capacity. In other words, at this margin that I get, I have to sell 10 jobs, which is, let's say, 10 million a month, or a million a
Right.
month, whatever. Do I have the capacity to do that? And you look and say, there's no way that I can afford the materials and to pay the labor and overhead while this job, I can't do 10 million. And you
Hmm.
need to know that, because if it's not even possible, then go do something else. That of course is not my suggestion, but it has to be possible. And I don't know if I know they're out there, but I don't know if I've ever encountered a contractor who really thought about, this is my capacity to do work. Financial capacity, people capacity, number of project managers, accounting support. This is what I can do. What margin
Yeah,
do I have to have? They don't think about it that way.
I haven't come across a lot of people who think about it that way. Most of these guys are just, they're really good tradesmen, and they know how to do the craft, and they understand what it takes to get a job of that size completed, but to really think about it strategically in a way of saying, how much can I take on without losing all my hair, or working 80 hours a week, that type of thing. That takes another level of strategy and really sitting down and digging deep.
Right.
And so,
do you work on that subject with your clients?
all the time. Yeah, I'm big on education. I'm big on strategy, and so that's a huge part of why I love what I do, because I get to tap into all these other different arenas. It's not just the numbers game. It's also, we're growing a company, and
Right.
we want to see these guys live healthy lives, where they can spend time with their families, they can take vacations, they can not just have a job that they're managing, but actually manage a company. And so that's kind of always the goal for me. And I only want to work with people who want to get there.
Well,
So,
oh, I love it. Two other things on bidding real quickly, and I think you already touched on them, is a lot of times I want to see a bid process. And people say, oh, we use $1.50 a square foot, or we use X dollars per yard, or, linear feet or something like that. I said, well, that might be okay. When was the last time you jumped into that $1.50 a square foot and analyzed it? And of course, with all the changes in the last 3 years, they're changing every time you do it. So that what you said about what's a nail cost? I say, oh, I don't want to have to do that on every job. I said, well, your suppliers are doing it to you because they're raising the cost of that nail a half a cent when their costs go up and pass it on to you.
absolutely.
And I tell people we can't be the price increase buffer between the supply chain and our customers. We have to do it. And one other thing, just real quickly, because you mentioned margins and markups. I was at a place last week, a prospective client, and I asked to see how they bid. So they had all their numbers there, and I don't know whether they got them by so much a square foot or what. And then they said, well, we had 10% for profit and we had 10% for overhead. And I said, well, I don't care what you called it. You added 20% to the price. They said, so we got a 20% margin. I said, no, that's a markup.
Yes.
20% markup is a 16% margin. And a 40% markup is a 28% margin. And if our listeners don't understand the difference between that, we could talk about it, but call Tim and find out what the difference is, because there's a big difference, right?
Huge difference. You have to understand that. You have to get that right. And once you start to understand the difference between markup and margin, you're just going to become a better estimator. And that's why I say it's more of an art form, because you start to play around with these markups, and you get to see, okay, what margin do they yield, and is it acceptable for my company? Because that's the reason why some contractors, or you may have 5 contractors bidding on one project, but one gets awarded, because some guys say, hey, I can't do it that cheap. It's going to hurt my company. It's worth me going out bidding 10 other jobs to get the right margin than to work this one job that I know is killing my margin and ultimately killing my company's profit.
Right.
And so I just can't take this on. It's going to do too much damage for me,